All right, glad to have you back. Well, again, earlier this week, the Monetary Policy Committee of the CBN decided to maintain its current stance, leaving all parameters unchanged. The committee retained the monetary policy rate at 27.5%, alongside a symmetric corridor around the MPR. Well, I have joining me Mr. Paul Alaje, who is a partner and senior economist with SPM Professionals. Thank you so much, Mr. Alaje, for joining the program.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me. A beautiful afternoon to you, sir.
Thank you. I think I should first, we should start this conversation by saying, what were you expecting? And now that these rates have been held again by the Apex Bank, what do you think is the implication for the business community and the larger economy?
First of all, I think the Monetary Policy Committee took a decision, but because holding is also a decision. The decision that was taken was much expected by us. We had emphasized that all rates will remain the same in the light of a number of factors. One, there is still global uncertainty, even though we have seen reduction in rates in advanced economies, which includes the UK, the US, etc., etc. But we can also say that for developing countries, rates are still generally high. For some countries, rates have continued to go down, including Nigeria. From 34%, there was an adjustment that led it to 24%. Now we're on 22.22%. To adjust rate while it's below 15% might be a little bit hasty. And when we say adjustment of rates, to what? If we make it higher, cost of borrowing will be higher, because when you look at a symmetric corridor of +5 - 100, it shows that rate of lending to banks, deposit money banks, may even be much higher than what we have today. The right decision was to sit on the fence, not really sitting on the fence literally, but also leaving the rate the way they were, which is at over 27%. What that means is in the coming period, the Monetary Policy Committee should be thinking of reducing rate, but not on the immediate, until we see where the current trend will go to. But you see, this coming period had its own concerns, and I would like to share those with you. So if you ask, what does this mean? It means that cost of borrowing to private sector is still going to be relatively high, at over 30%, over 32%, in some cases 35%, in some cases 40%, all in the name of trying to bring down high inflation to about single digit. The central bank government was very
Mr.
clear
Alaje, allow
as to
me
what
to
he wanted to achieve in single
interject
digit
you
inflation.
for just 1 minute. We need to just quickly take some live pictures. We'll continue our conversation. That's the governor of Lagos State commissioning some projects in Bariga Local Council Development Area. And I think that is on now, while we'll continue Business Nigeria on all other platforms. Mr. Alaje, let's get on our conversation, please. Go ahead.
Okay, so as I was saying, these have implications, and the implication is that cost of borrowing will still be relatively high. And why this? In order to discourage money supply and pushing money in the economy. Number two is that central bank hopes this rate will help to reduce money supply. You have seen what cash reserve requirement and liquidity ratios, what they are. They remain the same, and they are quite high. All of this is to ensure that we mop up excess liquidity in the system, we rake them back, and central bankers have control of money supply. But what do I see in the coming period? I think after 2 sittings from now, which we effectively be, we're expecting one in September, by the end of the year, we might not necessarily see a major difference in rate. We might not necessarily see a major difference in rate, except and unless we see major difference, because there are decisions, there are fiscal decisions that are inflating the economy. One of those decisions is what is shared in FAC. FAC, that's a Federal Account Allocation Committee, continue to share funds, which is rightly so, to the different tiers of government, which includes, but not limited to, executive. We have the federal government, the state government, and the local government. When these monies are shared, largest proportion of the money shared does not go into capital expenditure. Capital expenditure is not necessarily inflationary in nature, because it oftentimes comes with production or service delivery. Where we have the challenge is recurrent expenditure and component of those money that is converted to dollar for some reasons, maybe election, maybe whatever the reason may be. But I can tell you that the central bank once said the bank had its own concern in a monetary policy committee when the rates are we had a lot of imbalance in FX, that there seems to be a correlation between the time FAC is released and FX distortion in the market. And that was what economists have mentioned time and over again. But thankfully now we seem to have some level of stability reasonably at about 1,500 to 1,600 of the official exchange rate. That is where it oscillates between 1,500 to about 1,600, which I think is the new realities we have to face with and start building our nation from that particular level. So here is it. I expect rate to change maybe at the first meeting of next year or second meeting, but that in itself has a lot of caveats. The caveat is that by 2026, we should be cheering for political activities. Delegates for states and for federal elections, we start battling to determine who they will vote at indirect primary elections. And even for direct elections, we see what is shared in our recent political history is the US dollars. The question is, if this becomes ubiquitous as we have always seen it, then all the gains of the Monetary Policy Committee by holding rates, hijacking rates from 14% to about 27% plus, they may all disappear. And the gain from the exchange rate stability we have seen may also all disappear. What does this mean? What does this mean? All sectors, including fiscal authority, monetary authority, politicians, trade authority, must agree for the first time that we can run an election that is not going to dollarize our economy or put so much pressure on the naira that is currently trying to find its foot among currencies in the world.
Brilliant stuff there. What about inflation that we also see declining, kind of? Some say that's also a positive one. But the drivers of this inflation, do you think we are addressing them, particularly with focus on food?
Yes, we've seen some level of reduction in inflation. The current driver is food inflation is quite high. And this high inflation has implication on the economy. So there is something that we must fight. I'm very happy. I was very happy when I saw Mr. President made a comment. I really cannot say the organization he was speaking with, but I think it's one of the local committee organizations that engaged him. And he spoke directly to the issue. He said, forget it if we cannot find insecurity. And he's going to do everything possible to ensure that insecurity is dealt with one at a time. And I can tell you, if presidents achieve that, food inflation will drop drastically. Expectation of high inflation will also drop. We're going to have a much more robust economy because to people, they think it's just farmer headers. They just think it's S-men. But I can tell you, all of this is responsible for high cost of living. They are responsible for highest level of poverty, loss of rural jobs, and increase in the number of IDPs. So he said that there is no government that would be happy to see the level of IDPs, so, which is very correct. For those of us who have been on the path of advocacy and we have looked at government actions and decisions, we have analyzed them, whether they are positive or they are not good enough, and we have made it available to those in government so that they can govern us well and we can have a better economy. So what he has said, I completely agree with. Now the next thing will be, we need to start implementing the same. I must commend the Nigerian security forces for effort they put in place to have relative improved level of security in some areas, but we need to make this, we need to expand this to different parts of Nigeria. And I can tell you, Nigerian people are willing to support authorities in achieving a secured country such that food harvest we get to rural and urban centers, such as prices of goods will drastically reduce to where it should be. Food supply would also increase so that we will not be fighting for limited available food, and our nation will stop being a major inflator around the world.
In the first quarter of 2025, we've seen the base GDP and Nigeria's GDP grew 3.13% year on year. Well, an increase from 2.27% that we saw in the same period in the previous year. What would you make of that?
First of all, I must tell you that GDP has been rebased. I was expecting a much more rebased economy. I was expecting about $350 billion. What I saw was less than $300 billion. Positioning matters to me. I'm an economist, and I can also tell you that I represent some economy globally. It's a huge privilege that I have. What that means is I cannot be discussing Nigeria GDP in Naira terms because when it comes to global arena, which is where I have a voice, I have to talk about it in dollar terms. I appreciate the fact that the GDP number has increased. We saw the growth in GDP about 3.4 GDP growth rate, which is okay, but it's not sufficient. But I must say that I have some concerns and reservation about the last calculation. Are we using the current Naira or for 2019 or 2019 Naira and it's what to calculate the GDP numbers? I am tempted to say Bureau of Statistics and international watchers may need to go back and recompute that GDP. I strongly believe with the items that are added, the GDP number in dollar terms should be more than that. If you are calculating GDP in 2024, it also is only nice and correct to use the exchange rate of that year. If you are looking at GDP of 2023, it's only correct to use the exchange rate, average exchange rate for the year 2023. But to use the 2025 exchange rate to determine what happened previously, I can tell you that we might not be having a correct number. Therefore, the GDP number to me is very low. I strongly believe this economy, GDP, is higher than what has been published. And I say this because only recently I just concluded a tour to some part of Europe, and I saw the size of economy, not just on paper, but also in reality. I am not saying or suggesting that this economy is as robust as those economy in Europe, but I can tell you this economy, as we have it now, even in this hardship and how tough it is certainly more than $200 billion plus. I am very convinced that it is. And we need numbers to prove it. And this is where we need to come to agreement with the Bureau of Statistics, perhaps to review that number. It's allowed. It's allowable. It can be allowed. That number that we have is certainly more than $250 or $260 billion as reported. And I want to believe the authorities, we need to look at it because this has a lot of implications. I tell you, Mr. Tolu, this has a lot of implications. The positioning of your country, the size of your country, your per capita income, the grouping of wealth in your country, all of those are affected. So I think nice work done by Bureau of Statistics, but I think that this work needs to be reviewed because I am convinced, based on available information, that our GDP size is indeed larger than what we have today, and I don't think that Nigeria is worth what has been promoted. So this does not affect, it does not change the fact that we have grown. It does not change the fact that we have 3-point-something GDP growth rate. But how you know when you have rebased your economy is that your growth, rather than increasing, in most of the time, the growth rate will actually be lower than previous years. So I really don't know what happened along the line, but I want to tell you that I'm sincerely convinced that the Nigeria gross domestic product rebased should be more than what has been published. And I don't think we should be having the number that we just had.
Interesting. What about the sectors, performance of sectors specifically? Let's wrap up with that.
A number of sectors has improved. We have seen telco, we've seen real estate. The interesting one is real estate sector is properly captured now. And I also think that when you look at the valuation, if you are looking at valuation, are we looking at paper valuation, original valuation, or market valuation? These are some of the issues I have with the GDP numbers. You see, the real estate sector is far beyond what is quoted. Because when you look around the world and you compare notes in dollar terms with what is obtainable in some environments, I can clearly tell you and conveniently tell you that Nigeria's GDP is far more than what we have seen. We have also seen that there are other major contributors other than what's it called now, agriculture, that has contributed, that has always been one of the major contributors in the GDP. The growth rate is only 0.07% in real terms, but I can also mention to you that tech is now captured. A number of other things that over the years has not been captured by Bureau of Statistics statistics are now being captured in the numbers. And I think that, yes, these new sectors that have been captured, they are good ones, but please, we need to review their rate, their actual size, and the growth rate as we have it in 2024. That is going back, base year was changed from 2010 to 2019. And from 2019 to date, I think that is important that we review some of these numbers again so that we can give the true picture, the true size of what the economy, even though that does not capture the entire size of the Nigerian economy, because to a large extent, we still have nearly 50% of our economic size as informal, unreported, underreported in some cases for Nigeria's economy. And I tell you that the Nigerian economy as we have it today can never be less than $350 billion as against the kind of reports that we have on it. I think the Bureau of Statistics will do more. We have seen trade grew significantly, almost at par with the crop production, which is dominant in agri. We have also seen telco, which also used to compete with banking, has also grown significantly. Real estate did significantly well at over 10%. And I think that some of these numbers we need to really investigate more. Yeah, I don't have any dispute with telco rate, with telecommunication rate. I also don't have so much of dispute with trade and that of crop. I think that the real estate sector needs to be reinvestigated, among other sectors that have been published by the Bureau of Statistics.
Thank you so very much for your time, as always. Partner Senior Economist, SPM Professionals, Mr. Paul Alaje. Do have a great weekend.
Thank you so much for having me.